GameMarx.
This week on GameMarx, Lucasarts dies a scummy death at the hands of Disney. Vita's slow burn to success. Terraria digs a grave for Minecraft, and why the best ideas are stolen. Hey, EA didn't fuck up the Army of Two launch, but no one cares. Oh, alright everyone. Welcome to the show. I am recording this show Saturday morning instead of my normal Friday night. Just to start off and get the housekeeping out of the way, we were successful in getting our live stream up. So I shall be posting those to YouTube as well. But the $2,000 did pay off. I am still learning how to use lavalier mics in our new setup to kind of get the optimal recording and streaming setup going. But we were able to broadcast a beautiful 720p, 30 frames per second, 3 megabit rate stream. That just means it looks fucking great. That's what that meant. So look for that in the future. We'll be doing more live stuff and trying to do a show every Friday night. This past Friday night, we just I bought a bunch of NES games, just impulse, and bought them based on the sticker on the game or the name of the game, triggering some vague memory of, like, I think I played that once, or we rented that or something. And so we just shot down and ran through some awesome classics such as Base Wars and Wrath of the Black Mantis or something. I don't remember. It wasn't that great. Housekeeping, other than getting the stream up, the promised show for Walking Dead has not started yet. That's my fault. Took a lot to get the new studio up and going, and I spent a lot of time, which ended up being, don't plug USB 2.0 shit into USB 3.0 ports. They claim backward compatibility, but that doesn't always work and will fuck up in odd ways. So I didn't get that up. Hopefully we'll be able to start rolling on that long play this week. But the Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past and the original Legend of Zelda, those continue to go up. Friday posted probably one of my favorite moments so far, playing with the girls in Legend of Zelda, where they get to the Dogaron, or whatever. He looks like a baby dinosaur, according to my daughters, and they found him cute and cracked up laughing at him, and I thought of him as, you know, a boss, not something that you mock, but he's been ridiculed by two tween-age girls, so he has to, you know, pick himself up after that and find a way to live on. So those are continuing to come out. The next games in our queue, I don't know when the videos will start posting, but I'm going to play Chrono Cross. I'm going to ignore everyone who's ever told me that it is not going to be a Chrono Trigger level quality game and that I just should move on. But I can't help it. You know, I played Chrono Trigger on the DS. Watching two best friends wrap up their Chrono Trigger playthrough, I'm like, I want some more Chrono Trigger, and the only way I can get that is this Chrono Cross game. So pick that up for the PlayStation, and I will force Cicely to play alongside me over noted protest, and start posting those videos. I don't know how long I'll last that game. If it actually turns out to be as horrible as everybody says, it may not be a complete playthrough. So, alright. Not a lot of big news this week. Most everybody unwinding from GDC, PAX, kind of a calm, take a breath moment as we wait here for ramp up to E3, and supposedly Microsoft should have some event this month for Xbox, so they can announce the Xbox pre-E3, and then go into E3 basically just allowing more hands-on, but have their own press event. I'm going to start off with a bit of news that is a little bit more of a personal call here. So this first bit, excuse me, I'm also recording this on Saturday because I was under the weather this week and wasn't feeling up to it to try to do everything at once Friday night. So, life-saving crowdfunding campaigns begins for an indie dev. Chloe Sagal, looking for $35,000 to fund an operation. Essentially, she was in a car accident, and there is some metal still lodged in her, I'm guessing her head. It doesn't, so it mentions compromising position and high risk to remove that. And I'm just mentioning this not necessarily because she's an indie dev or like that. I'm just calling this out that if this is a worthwhile endeavor to donate to, if you go look into the background and her site and their campaign and things like that, she did, has health insurance that refused to pay and lost her suit in court, tried a malpractice suit and lost that in court. So she really is at, a point where needs the donations to come in to get the surgery in time, because the metal poisoning that will be coming from the metal in her head could shorten her life to the next couple months. Now, I point this out because if you're a long-time listener to the podcast, you know that both Dylan and I are cancer survivors. We've seen, me a little bit more than Dylan, have seen the underbelly of our insurance system and what they refuse to cover and don't cover. And one of the things that I knew that kind of was not going to be covered for me after treatment, but was recommended by all my doctors, was to get hyperbaric oxygen chamber treatment, which is essentially stuffing you in a tube, cranking up the pressure, and making you breathe oxygen, 100% oxygen for a little bit. This causes blood vessels to grow in the places where blood vessels have stopped growing. In my case, it would be in my jawbone where the radiation has killed all of my blood vessels. And essentially this is really bad for my jawbone. That'll eventually turn to dust and crumble, and I will be left without a jaw. So after my radiation treatments were complete, and they were like, hey, we need to get this so that, you kind of need a jawbone. We want to keep that to you. The insurance company was like, nope, sorry, you just had cancer, so you're probably going to die in the next 5 years, and we're not going to spend any money on you. That literally was their response. I'm now about 10 years out from my last treatments on that and going all that. So I'm right now waiting on a determination, again, from health insurance to say whether or not they're going to cover this. And this is one of those fucked up things where if I was over in the UK, these treatments are like $8 a treatment, and they can be as high as $2,000 a treatment in the US. So the reason I'm pointing out her case and her story is not only just to help her out if you can, but also if you can, or just remember that shit is fucked up. And don't just, if you're in the U.S., believe everything you hear. Do a little digging and dive in and find out that, I've always worked and always had great insurance coverage, comparatively speaking, what is considered great in the U.S. And I've found how little that covers. So, don't make an assumption that if you have insurance, you're safe, and pay attention to some of these debates going on, and inform yourself a little bit and vote accordingly, and let the people in Washington know that this shit has to be fixed. I mean, this is getting ridiculous that you can be in a state where, you need a procedure, you have insurance to save your life, and the insurance goes, not covered because you're likely to die from the procedure anyway, so we would just be wasting our money saving your life. We don't want to make that attempt, so we're just going to let you die anyway. It's scary, but it's that scene from Fight Club, where he first meets his alter ego there, and they have that conversation of, you just do the math and you figure out the cost of a lawsuit versus the cost of saving people, and you go with the cheapest. Alright, enough of that. Let's move on to, this isn't happy news now, is it? So let's move on to Disney closes Lucasarts. Yes, this was kind of the story of the week. I'm not going to say that this is surprising, though. If you go back on our podcast when we talked about LucasArts and Lucasfilm being purchased by Disney, my thesis, my reasoning as why Disney was buying them, is the brand names and the IP so that they can market to young boys. Disney has a very strong toy line and product line and movies and such towards little girls. They have that sewn up pretty tightly, but if you look at a lot of their acquisitions with Marvel, Lucasarts now getting Star Wars, all these things line up and point to shoring up the male side of their marketing of toys and products and all that. And of course, in that, having Lucasarts as a video game studio, Disney already has a game studio. It's kind of redundant. They have the IP. They could develop it in-house if they wish. And they talked about basically they're going to move to more of a licensing role, IP licensing, so allowing third-party developers to come in and take the LucasArts properties and, you know, make sequels or make other games or ports based upon that licensing property. I mean, from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. From, you know, somebody who grew up playing LucasArts games back in the golden era, you know, it's a little rough to hear. So Gamasutra has a link back to the GDC in, I believe this was in 2011, remembering Maniac Mansion. So it's Ron Gilbert up there talking about Maniac Mansion, and this is a good one to listen to because of it's one of his favorite games still that he's created. And, you know, just hearing interesting things at the time as far as getting video games into Toys R Us and having Toys R Us pull the video game from a complaint because the word lust appeared on the back of the box, and just dealing with that era. I mean, you think the censorship and stuff is bad now, and reactionary. Go back and listen to this talk. This is a great talk. And Maniac Mansion is a game that's queued up on my Mike's Plays to go through. I know everybody talks about Day of the Tentacle, but for me it was the classic Maniac Mansion that I came to and played first. That really was the pinnacle of the Scum systems, system games that I enjoyed very, very much on that game. And also just kind of in a unique, like, high point of adventure games. I mean, it kind of had some of the weird, you know, adventure game puzzles. They don't quite make sense until you get your mind in the head of the designer. But it allowed you to select, a lot like The Cave, it allowed you to select from a number of different players that had different abilities. And, you know, if you're sitting down, I think, even though The Cave may not be a commercial success, I think looking at The Cave and looking at Maniac Mansion as a way to offer variety within the adventure game, by having the player have 6 or so characters to choose from, but they're only allowed to have 3 in their party for their entire playthrough of the game. Something that Ron Gilbert has done a couple times now, and I think that's a really good way to have some variance and have some replayability in an adventure game. So I said on Twitter, you know, I'm pouring out a blue milk for everybody who's losing jobs at LucasArts. It's kind of sad to see that they just shut down whole cloth the studio like that, but this is the kind of things that happen in the mergers and acquisition world. You don't need the Disney studio and you don't need the Lucasfilm studio at the same time, and not when you can just license the IP of LucasArts out, you know, and then there's a lot less risk in that model. So I can't say that this is truly a shocking thing. Develop has a good article up post GDC 13 of Develop's EIC editor-in-chief running down the major trends that he saw at GDC. And the number one that he lists on here is that free-to-play is going AAA. So, I mean, what this means is that big studios now, and we've seen this with the Dead Space 3 and things like that, is that the AAA studios cannot get enough free-to-play. That is, you know, the future as they see it, microtransactions. I think the AAA studios are trying to have their cake and eat it too by charging $60 for a game that has microtransactions in it, which is kind of disgusting to the player base that would pay $60 for a game. And they're going to need to realize, like, if you're going to play to the $60 hardcore crowd, you're not going to be able to get away with much free-to-play happening in that space. You know, you can pretty much go free with it and do Team Fortress 2 and sell hats and all kinds of crazy things with it, and then that's kind of more acceptable. So they're going to learn this, I think, and I think they're going to learn this the hard way, and hopefully they will track it back to their models, not necessarily... I don't know how the AAA studios love to point to trends and blame their games on trends in the industry rather than anything they did themselves. So that's not a big surprise. Now, he did say that, you know, that there was a trend that expensive games, you know, the $60 market is there, but only if it's cost effective. And essentially, I think if you read between the lines, cost effective means cranking out a game every year in the series, and just milking a series to death. But because you're cranking it out annual, you're basically reusing assets in the engine to get a new game out every year. Again, I think this is a AAA studio. I don't understand how... I understand how the accountants can get in there and say this stuff. I don't understand how there's not somebody on the other side going, however, if we run the game series out every year, each year it is devalued and will not, you know, we can't expect Call of Duty and Modern Warfare alternating type revenue models on every single one of these. That is not the golden goose there that we can keep expecting eggs from. So this is going to be interesting because as we go into a new console generation, pushing this heavy free-to-play and pushing these annualized franchises is really pushing away the hardcore audience, which, if the hardcore audience is not seeing the titles and the games on the next-gen platforms, and the next-gen platforms take it on the chin in terms of sales come this holiday season, it's going to be a very interesting industry come 2014, because it'll pretty much be the first time that a console generation hasn't sparked a major interest back in consoles. With all that's happening on the PC right now, and I am getting awful chat notices. I am sorry. I should have shut down Steam. All right, so did that right there. I apologize. So with getting you know, all this stuff that's going on in Steam, and I know this has been the case every single cycle. The PC gaming is always biggest right before new consoles come out. But it just seems, it feels like it might be different this time, that this might be the watershed moment, the singularity, which we don't go back, and consoles are not a thing. Sony looks like they're doing a lot of interesting things. Microsoft still hasn't announced, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, but it's getting harder and harder to make that case and make that value proposition of a, you know, at launch, a $400, $500 piece of hardware. You know, to dedicated just to playing games in the living room, and that these games turn out to be microtransaction-based $60 titles, you could lose a significant contingent of the market there that you need. You need those early adopters to justify those sales, so that when EA and the publishers look at the consoles, they can say, hey, there's enough units sold that we will support this console. So that ties into the next thing of the myth of the microconsoles, and the feeling out of the industry, out of GDC, as reported by Develop's editor-in-chief here, is that it is just that. It's a myth. GameStick and Ouya and Oculus Rift are essentially developer consoles made for other developers, and that these things will not grab the market share that they need to be supported by major publishers. It could be some really wild indie stuff happening, on these consoles, so I'm not saying, avoid them, but don't look at them. Look at them as having less of a potential of sales than Xbox Live indie games, essentially. Dive into it with that mentality, and you're okay. If you want to do something for the sake of doing it, and jump on some of these open consoles like this, go ahead. But right now, the industry is kind of, we don't see it being a major player. So indie wariness starting to set in. And he mentions in his write-up that the New York Times put GDC on the cover and said that indies have grabbed control, which is a wonderful story, to run with. It's definitely a headline. It's definitely a good, nice bullet to point out that, the revolution has taken place and the indies are in charge now and it's total chaos and it's awesome. But the reality is, and we'll talk about this, in later here in a moment when I talk about salary surveys, is that it is still very much a AAA dominated world. They're still making the bucks. They're still paying the salaries. And most indie studios are not doing that hot. He describes it as a journey distortion field. Journey has created an indie distortion field, and kind of like Fez, Phil Fish, Super, Team Meat, these guys, they have created this story that is getting repeated a lot, that, hey, it's just free money out for the taking, crank out your games. I think the problem left off with that view is the problem left off pretty much on any kind of industry analysis on gaming many times, is you don't look at the quality of the games. If you look at the quality of the games, even like the guys that are making Kingdom Rush, right, on iOS, that's a good quality game. They're doing well. The ones that are crap are not doing well. And it really doesn't matter if you're a AAA or you're an indie. You make a good game, you tend to do well. You make a crap game, you don't. And I know there's a few exceptions that are going to prove the rule of, like, these are really good games that just didn't get discovered. But developers that can make good games that aren't being discovered will get discovered. Those are notches in waiting that will blow up and have their moment. They just, stick at it and release a couple games. And even those ones that aren't blowing up are bringing in some money. They're developing a fan base. I think there's a tendency, especially among indies, and I hear this most often from other indies or see it happen most often, of thinking that, the Xbox Live indie game marketplace was too small, the Vita didn't give them the promotion they deserved, or not enough people like PC gaming, or, gamers have a hang-up about 60 frames per second, yada, yada, yada. And these are the reasons that their game failed, not that the game sucked. And I think most of the indie games are failing because the game sucked. Most indie game developers, even if they have prior game development experience in the industry, this is their first time soup to nuts doing game design. And there's a lot of pieces where, you used to be able to go down the hall and talk to the artists, and they came up with some stuff, and it rocked, and it was awesome. And even if you're working as an indie studio and you're contracting that out, if you don't understand all the effort and systems and everything that goes into creating art as a developer, you don't know what to ask for. You don't know what to get back that is good. And you don't know why something works and why something doesn't work to explain to your artist what exactly it is you need. And these are the things that you're going to learn as you make your entire game yourself. And hopefully you take the opportunity to learn these things instead of kicking the can down the road and just saying, oh, well, gamers just, they demand, AAA studio quality art, when that's not the case. You can have really bad art style if it's done well and it fits well with the gameplay, and still have an amazing, successful game. There's many games out there that prove that. So I think that's one. Indies are not taking over the world, and I don't think they have any bigger hit or miss ratio than AAA studios do with their titles, and a lot of times it's a failure of the game design and the title more than it has to do with really anything of the market. Good games get played. I think at the end of the day, that's a truism, and there might be a few exceptions to the rule, but I think you can believe in good games get played, and if your game is not, people are not playing it, You can tweak a few things. You can try some pricing strategies. You can look at your marketing efforts, because many times any developers overlook any marketing effort. So you can look at what your marketing efforts are. But even if you've played those things, if the game's not getting played, you might just say, hey, oh, maybe this is a bad game, and why is it bad? What can I learn from this so I don't make that mistake in my next game and get better as a game developer? His last couple points here, emotional issues, point of path to enlightenment. I talked about this a lot. I'm not going to go into all the sexual harassment and IGDA issues and all that again on this podcast. You know, I've hit those the last couple of podcasts hard, but these things are getting very transparent, very vocal, very out there. So it's becoming something that studios are starting to have to become accountable and answer to, and getting called on their shit if they're not. So that seems like the big first step into just a industry not accepting the behavior anymore. The industry, the people who work at the game company just not accepting the old behavior. Has to be something that's like, hey, now you're not going to be able to attract the top talent anymore if you continue that. So that's pretty good. And the last thing is he wanted to point out is that the Xbox absence tells us nothing about next gen. And yeah, there's a lot of stories going on about Microsoft and indies and Microsoft's next game market and what's going on. And really, Microsoft hasn't said anything, but what he's pointing at is really the frustration is in the press, because Microsoft hasn't said anything versus anything more really about the next Xbox. And, we should be getting some information this month, so just hang tight, guys. We'll find out what's going on and what the real villains will be when that comes up. So, I said that I was going to talk about the Game Developer Survey. And Game Developer Magazine, they have published their annual survey results. And the average income for U.S. game-based developers was $85,000, which is continuing to go up over the last several years, and layoffs continue to go down, so these are good things to hear. I actually went and I was reading this article, and you know what? I subscribed to the print edition of Game Developer Magazine, because I'm like, I don't have enough print magazines in my life, and I don't say that ironically. I just like getting things in the mail, and you get a magazine and you just pore over the articles and look at the wonderful layouts. And, while I'm not going to read a book anymore, physical, I'm going to read it on my Kindle. I don't want to read a magazine on a mobile, or an iPad or something. It's not the same. And plus, I kind of like the idea of just getting a monthly recap. It's $50 a year, to subscribe to get the print edition. So this just like pushed me over the edge. And I remember at a time too when I looked at subscribing to Game Developer Magazine, it was like $200. And this was back in like the 90s. It was an industry trade publication, and it was $200, and it was just something that I could not subscribe to justify it. As a guy who writes line of business code, all day long, I couldn't subscribe to like a hobby magazine at $200 a year. That just was not happening. So the gender gap is alive and well. More on that in a moment. Medical, dental, and vision coverage are on the rise, which, this should not be an on the rise thing. This should basically be a given. That, your employer provides medical, dental, and vision. Like, that should be covered. That there's some laws going into effect about that. And this is part of our problems in the game industry and the United States as a whole with the medical issue. But it is good to see that the coverage is increasing, and hopefully they will not play loophole games, and they will just, give healthcare to your people. I mean, if you're working in the industry, the AAA industry. You know, if you're a slave to the grind, you're probably going to get laid off at some point. That at least do that, you know, at least get that kind of coverage. Indies are still struggling. So I said I was going to come back to this, but the indie developer averaged $23,000 a year. So compare that. If you're working in the studio, you're getting $85,000. If you're working as an indie, you're getting $23,000. Obviously, it's going to vary widely in the indies, but I think that really sheds some light on indies are not dominating the world right now. That is, I pay the rent money. That is not anything to brag about and write home about. That is basically doing that. Now, what indies responded, and you know, of course, there's outliers. Would be more interesting to see the actual raw numbers, which are in the magazine, which I just subscribed to, so I don't have those here. And then a big thing is that they point out that devs are concerned about industry changes, which, you know, there's a big thing on this write-up on Gamma Sutra where they were going through quoting the good and the bad and free-to-play mobile, you know, console industries. These are basically just a bunch of quotes, and of course they're out of context. Built in a survey, so you know you can't read too much into these because you know it may just be the one guy's situation at the one guy's company. But it is worth reading some of the quotes just to see some of the things that have been said on the survey. All right, so speaking of the survey, the gender gap, the editor of the magazine of the Game Developer magazine, Patrick Miller, he basically said that, hey, you know, as the editor-in-chief here, I just want to make clear some of the numbers, right? Because people love to take the gender gap numbers and say, hey, there's a sexist bias that devalues women developers, and then other people basically say, well, there aren't that many female developers, and if they're holding less senior positions, then you know, the fact they're holding less senior positions may be an issue, but their payment is not off and adjusted and all that. And he basically wanted to say that, hey, that there are, in the survey, 623, I think, where did he say? I want to say he just said, yada. Production had, oh, come on, there was an area where he gave me the number. He gave the number that there was that many. Oh, so he's talking, this is specifically to programmers, because programmers, females were up, and that the programmers were up 4%, and making a few thousand more than the male programmers, but that the sample pool was 494 male programmers versus 22 female programmers. So there's not enough data here to draw statistical conclusions, to do extrapolations, and all these kinds of things. So the answer is really both, that there is not enough data to draw strong conclusions and do extrapolations with in that study, but also, yes, there's some sexism and bias in the industry, you know, as a whole. That is also, you know, that's probably the truth lies somewhere in the middle answer here. But, you know, from this survey, from this just, you know, one Game Developer magazine's survey, don't go to the Twitters and the Facebooks and pronounce that there's an epidemic or that the problem is solved one way or the other, because you don't have the data to stand on that. All right. Robert Boyd on the Z-Boyd blog had an interesting article on the rebirth of the Vita. And this is something I've kind of noticed as well myself. It seems that the Vita is getting mentioned a lot. A lot of people are porting to the Vita. They're announcing ports to the Vita. This ties in with Sony's push for indies and bringing people up. And he has some sales numbers over time, and it looks like they're going up. slightly, slowly, and that it has become the second most best-selling handheld in Japan this year, though it's, still light years behind the 3DS, which is not doing hot itself. So, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. It's something that, if you're interested in targeting, or, that's the handheld market that you want to go at. Obviously, any handheld market, the overall is suffering from iPhones and iPads, grabbing up a lion's share of mobile gaming now, and really just making you wonder why you would update. My personal problem with it is I don't see a reason to jump on these new devices. They're either large and bulky, in my opinion. The Vita is kind of a large, bulky device, with some stupid touchscreen on the back thing happening. Or, the 3DS is bulky and has this 3D gimmick I don't really care for. The Nintendo DS Lite, is still my mobile game platform. It's still what I break out when I play on the road, because it slips into your pocket. It goes easily everywhere with me. Great battery life and everything on it. And it's just like, if you guys iterated upon that design and tried to dial that in without trying to have like this 3DS game gimmick going on, I might be more interested in the new mobile gaming platforms. But, most of my mobile gaming platforms is happening on my phone now, which of course has a cell data access, so I can tap into all kinds of social games and challenge friends and things like that, something these handhelds have also struggled at. But it is going to be an interesting trend to watch. I agree with Robert here that this is something to watch, and we don't know, I guess, where the Vita actually is going to come and peak at and rest at. It seems to be growing a bit slowly. The GameMaker blog had an interesting article. Not necessarily because they are analyzing the GameMaker Studio Collection and is the value worth it. This is is it worth the one-time flat fee? But as I go in, breaking the price down cost, they have a very interesting paragraph here about the hidden costs. And this is something that's not brought up enough, I think. But if you're looking at, say, targeting iOS, then if you want to publish to iOS, then you have to pay a $99 annual fee, and there's several $100s to get an iOS device. Plus, you're going to need a Macintosh computer to deploy to your device. So, if that's the platform you're going to target, if you have those things already, then that's okay. You can factor that in. But it is something to look at. Like, it's more than just going to Unity or to GameMaker and buying their add-in thing. As well as like, if you're looking at monogame and you're looking at deploying your monogame to iOS, well, you're going to have to, or Android, you're going to have to buy a copy of Xamarin and deal with their annual licensing scheme as well, on top of the marketplace things. So it's worth researching into these. They point out if you're doing an HTML5 game, you could be realistically making huge investments into server infrastructure to distribute HTML5 games. So every platform that you look into is going to have more cost than the development environment. The development environment may not even be the most significant cost, although those tend to be brandied about the most in forums and on Twitters, the Facebooks, as one versus the other. That there's these other costs of the platform that you got to consider as well. All right, let's round up some dumb shit from major studios. Number one, Zynga is taking the plunge into real money gambling. This is my guess. This probably marks the end of Zynga as a social gaming company. This will be the decline. They will go into real money gambling. They will find that, hey, there's real money in real money gambling. The house always wins. Their addiction-based model is even better when there's money behind it. And once they can tie real money into some of their other properties, they probably will. And at the expense of their other properties, which have been hit or miss, for them in terms of revenue generation. They've just had nothing but decline since their IPO. There's also stories that they're now throwing more cash at their executives to keep them from leaving, just so they don't take the stock hit every time somebody else leaves the company, and that's never good. That never works out. So next up we have EA, mobile boss. Freemium haters are a vocal minority. The market has spoken in favor of free-to-play. No premium mobile games in 2013. So, when you speak in terms of absolutes like that, yes, there's a freemium model, there's a free-to-play model. It attracts a certain kind of market that works well on the mobile platform because people are trying out the game. But there is a contingent. There's a lot of gamers I hear who, you go in there and you look at the number one purchases on the app, and when they see like the number one purchases in this app are like, $100 of Smurf berries, don't even bother downloading the game. So, and then there's, the case of when you see, like Kingdom Rush gives me pause because you go in there. I haven't actually bought the game. I've heard great things about it, but you have to buy the game, and then you see that there's a freemium model inside the game, and it's like, well, how is that balanced? Because, I feel like you're trying to do both. So I think the idiocy here is just expecting there to be one model that's going to get all the games. And this really the flaw in thinking on this is the long tail, right? The idea that, yes, there's a head of the market, but the tail of the market, the smaller niches, add up to greater than the head, So I think the classic example is like Britney Spears will go out, and this tells you how old the book is, but Britney Spears will go out and, have these huge album hits. But the irony is that all of these smaller artists, if you add them up in total, dwarf the sales of Britney Spears, and that the audience that are buying all those smaller audience are not buying the Britney Spears album. So you're not actually capturing the majority of the market. You're just capturing the largest pool of the market. But that pool in and of itself is not that big. So this is just another thing, another accountant's in charge at a major studio, and, they're going to come out and like, oh, we have the magic bullet. Here it is. And again, I think you have to go back to what I said earlier in the show and look at, are the games any good? You can say that freemium dominates or that, purchases dominate, but it's really up to what the game is. Does the gameplay support a freemium model? Does that feel natural with the gameplay? And is the game good? If the game is good, people are going to play it. People are going to pay for it. If the game's not good, they're not going to. And you can't blame a bad game on the pricing model. But you can destroy a good game by cramming a pricing model in it that people do not want. So let's move on to Ubisoft. What dumb shit did Ubisoft say? Player satisfaction justifies the sequels of Assassin's Creed. Essentially, Ubisoft Montreal boss says, hey, the annual sequels do not create player fatigue. That we're fucking awesome and people love Assassin's Creed, and we're just going to pump after hit, and, it sounds like the housing market can only go up. He's going to run, the franchise into the ground. From the reviews that I took away of Assassin's Creed 3, which I'm back a couple version games on Assassin's Creed, simply because every time I hear the new one come out, I just hear more complaints than praise. And, the whole thing of the latest one I heard was the boat sequence. And, when they ditch it so quick to move from 3 on to 4, just sounds like, hey, you guys are just trying to rush something out the door and just capitalize on a moment versus making an engaging gameplay. And I don't have the time, honestly, to do that. Now, they're saying that, hey, Assassin's Creed 3 sold 12 million units a day, making it the most successful game in the biggest launch in their history. Wonderful. But part of that too is just like people are waiting for the third one. You guys kept dicking around with, you know, these non-official sequential, you know, like you have your Brotherhood and things like that, and it's just like, well, I want to move the story forward. I kind of want to find out what's going on, what happened, but you guys really don't have a plan for that. And I think in the long term, you destroy what could be a great classic trilogy, you know? There's something to be said for the trilogy format in games, or maybe, you know, like Metal Gear Solid, you know, going on 4 games, although they're talking about a 5th now, but that it and Mass Effect, you know, they have their set of games, you know, Gears of War has its set of games. Let it stand on its trilogy and then go away from it for a while. Although nobody seems to be doing that, you know, but go away from it a while and then bring it back, you know, bring it back in a resurgence. I think in the long run might do better for the franchise and for profits, and for quality of the game than cranking them out every year. But hey, you know, who am I to argue with their numbers, right? So let them run it into the ground. What did Microsoft say? Microsoft creative director at Microsoft Studios tweeted that he doesn't get the drama around always on DRM. That's the world we live in now, and hashtagged it, deal with it. So this really goes up to take away Twitter from your executives if they can't control themselves. If they're going to say dumb shit like this, take them off of social networking. You know, this is one guy spouting off some dumb shit, and he says, hey, I'm back and forth trolling my friend here, but you're saying it on the Twitters where everybody can read it, and everybody's panicked about the, you know, always online DRM system, and what that can mean for consoles, and that has gone bad for several launches, from Diablo 3 to this, you know, SimCity, and, you know, hey, it's just a bad time to make that crack and that remark, especially when everybody is looking for something on your console and they're trying to hang their hat and run news stories on anything they can find. And, you know, you tweet something like that, they're going to run a news story. So I don't think this is any insight into what Microsoft is doing on the next Xbox, but I do think this is insight into just get these guys, shut up your executives if they can't behave themselves on social networking. Understand when they go out and they do that, that their positions in those companies are going to be, you know, news story and newsworthy, and that they are representing the company when they go out on social media. Sorry, but it's true. You know, just like on your bottom employees, you know, if some guy working on a Microsoft Studios title game goes and tweets something about the game franchise, he's going to be called into the office of legal and threatened with NDAs and possibly firing. You need to do that with your senior executives as well, because it just does not help your position. And Microsoft does love to be kicked on right now. But here's some good news, maybe? I don't know. Windows 8 tops 10% share on Steam survey. So Valve is publishing their hardware statistics, and 9.92% are running the 64-bit version of Windows 8. So it's climbing a little bit. I think Windows 8 has around 3.7%, according to NetShare. So there's a higher adoption rate, which makes sense. You know, the gaming audience would be your early adopters. They would move first. You know, 10%, edges it out over Linux. I mean, I don't know what, you know, like, let's compare that to that XP, it overtook XP 32-bit. That's great, right? Okay. Windows 7 is still 55% of the user base on Steam, and Windows 7 64-bit, excuse me, and 13% was regular Windows 7. So Windows 7 by far dominating on there. But, well, you know, maybe Windows 8. It'll be interesting to watch. Does that continue to rise, or does that level off? And, you know, Steam's a pretty good survey, I think, on the early adopter market. So if you're just kind of looking at, like, hey, what's the early adopter market, which could signify trends later, I think it's a good bet up here. All right. Terraria and Minecraft are big sellers on XBLA in March. And I think what this means to me, where Terraria, for the week, not all time, for its week, knocked off Minecraft from the #1 position, which is, I think, the first game to do so. I think what it tells to me is, like, there is a need, there is a niche that is huge, that is not being served by the current gaming market and all your wonderful freemium and EA, Ubisoft, AAA, accountant-driven market. For these type of exploratory, offbeat, different times of gameplay games, that, you know, if you can figure that out, right? If you can figure out a game system like that, that is very, very popular right now, and you can make a lot of sales at the moment. And you know, it's really up for grabs, and that ties into an article that this is not a article with any gaming press. This is I really don't know who this guy is. I kind of should know this James Altucher. I like his writings, okay? I probably should know who he is. He's probably some mogul and launched some startups and made a whole bunch of shit of money, and that's why he's got this whole, you know, insight or something doctrine. I don't know. I don't know who he is. I like the stuff he posts, and he's got this great article up here. The only good idea is an unoriginal idea, right? So you hear how the story of, like, Minecraft took out Infiniminer, the map building mode, and made it a game, and of course Terraria is very iterative upon Minecraft. And he has this article, and this is a really great read, talking about the painting of The Last Supper, and, you know, kind of the original paintings of The Last Supper that happened, which happened way before Da Vinci's. You know, the iconic one is this very pristine, everybody's very reverent, everybody's got halos around them and everything. You know, this very sanitized take on the situation. But, you know, like, if you actually consider the events of, like, you know, Jesus going, you know, hey, one of you guys are going to betray me, and everybody's around the table going, hey, that's some shit to say at the dinner table. What the hell's going on? It's probably more chaos and more interesting things are happening, which if you then look at this article and you look at Da Vinci's Last Supper, there's a lot more chaos involved at this table. And then he even goes into Dali's take on the table, to where he has everybody around the table instead of just in front of the table, and brings in some of Dali's ghosts and spirit. And then what Andy Warhol, you know, takes the Da Vinci one and does a bunch of screens and the Andy Warhol thing to it, and all the way down to Battlestar Galactica, you know, riffing on the idea. But that the good ideas are not original ideas. The good ideas are taking the poorly implemented, or the, you know, the ideas that are out there, and just, you know, adding your flair, your thought, your insight to them, right? And so that's what Notch did to get to Minecraft, and that's what the guys behind Terraria did to get up to the next version of Terraria. I'm sorry, to an evolution of Minecraft with Terraria, Minecraft in 2D. But when you go and you play Terraria, you get a feeling of, like, man, this starts off like a Minecraft game, but it's really not. Like, it goes into its own thing, and has a much different focus beyond just the 2D Minecraft idea, you know. And I think it's a really good article, and it's something as a game developer, as a game designer, you should think about and be aware of. And also remove that devil on your shoulder. If he exists. I know for some of you out there, he does not exist at all. But remove that developer on that story, on your shoulder, who's telling you you have to be unique and original, and you shouldn't take from anyone else and just, you know, create everything yourself. Because it's going to be impossible, and it's going to be really hard to come up with something that is fun and engaging especially as you're starting out, not just later in your career, but as you're starting out, to come with that and say, hey, I like Smash TV. I'm going to dive into and make a Smash TV clone and add my little twist to it. I'm going to add my Da Vinciism to that, and that you may hit. You may find something that blows up. And then, let the fanboys argue it out in the forums as to whether it's a clone or not, or whether it's iterative and then all games are clones. And let that article play out elsewhere. Other interesting articles that I have up here. What is delicious? Sometimes like the stuff that Thomas Ella puts up there, and sometimes I think he's way off, but I think he really nailed this one. I really agree with him here on Bioshock Infinite, which I have not played. So, but he talks about how they trick you into liking Elizabeth, and how this character in concept and in pre-release versions was shown to be this very integral part, and was going to be there to really could almost be a figment of your imagination, and designed just to do the perfect thing at the perfect moment to kind of make you like the character without having to feel like it's a 10-hour escort mission. Excellent article. Read the whole thing, and this is something to be thinking about. Not saying that one is bad and one is good. It's just tools in the toolbox to when you're designing companions and characters in the game, how you can design a response from the player to make them feel as if they enjoy or like your other characters versus as if they hate them. I still haven't played Star Fox, but from what I understand from Star Fox, there's a lot of hate because there's a lot of escort missions in that game, and that's the side you don't want to be on. So you want to make them either meaningful escort missions that tie into the developer, but at least remove the roadblocks from the game. I think is a good takeaway from that. And the last one, I'm going to cite another game dev tutorial article, how to create a custom 2D physics engine. There's the basics of collision and impulse resolution. And this is a really good article. We've joked a lot on the podcast and such about I don't need a physics engine. I have sine and cosine. And, diving into the math, I don't feel like a lot of time I need to go out and grab a physics engine and drop it in my game. I can pretty much write the physics that I want custom to my game pretty easily because, understanding these basic math equations, and they're not that hard, gives you that ability. Yes, there's probably a time and place where you want to grab a physics engine, but, for a lot of platformers, you really don't need one. Getting into some 3D game physics, you might, the equations get a little bit more complicated in 3D versus 2D. But even then, you might just say, hey, I'm down with my quaternions and my matrix multiplication, so, I don't really need that. So, all right, that wraps up another GameMarx show. Thank you guys for watching us on YouTube or downloading the audio podcast. I will be back doing this again in a week, and until then, remember, if you don't ship the damn game, it didn't count.